This is episode 95 of Stand Up. I am Pete Dominic. Joining me today, three excellent guests. We've got BillBinDC having a thoughtful conversation as always. I get to know Midwin Charles, who is a legal commentator and lawyer, and the great John Donvan joins me as well. Shall we do this? Let's roll. Hello. Hi. How are you? Are you good? Are you handling this? Are you dealing with this? Are you having ups and downs? I appreciate you joining me here on the program. Have an awesome lineup of guests. Last night, I had an awesome lineup of listeners. Over 50 people who are paid subscribers joined me in a Zoom chat, and it was fun. Oh, it was fun. We talked for like an hour and a half. I'd love to see you in there. Sign up for a paid subscription at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. And if you are a subscriber and you haven't joined us, I know it might be weird to just sign up and hang out in a Zoom chat with a whole bunch of other people that you don't really know, but people are getting to know each other. They're chatting in the chat during the video conference, and it's fun. I'm having a great time with it, making lots of jokes, having lots of fun. I'm making fun of people. They're making fun of me, and it's really a great group of people, as I say about those who listen to this show. They're curious, kind, passionate, funny, and intelligent, and that's what we're looking for. That's what I'm looking for in a guest. That's what I'm looking for in a listener, and I appreciate you being one of those people. So sign up with a paid subscription. Join us in the Zoom chats that we've been doing, that I will, by the way, totally continue to do once we return to, quote, normal, although that's debatable when and what that is going to mean, whatever the hell normal means. So lots to get to on today's show. I don't want to waste much time. I do want to ask you how much you like a news segment at the top of this podcast. I feel like there's so much out there for you to listen to, and you probably got some trusted hard news sources that you listen to. But a lot of people last night were saying that they miss that when I don't do it. So I'm a little bit torn. If that's something that you want to hear from me and my version and my spin on all the things, the stories I'm picking, then let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to have these great guests and conversations, and that will be probably the majority of the show, as well as listeners like you joining the conversation anytime we can make that work. So let's do it. How about that? First, I have a conversation with my friend Bill. He is a Washington, D.C. resident and an all-around smart guy, and he's a longtime caller of the show who I became very good friends with. He's a trusted source. I like to tangle with him. I like to talk with him, and people love our conversations. And I had an urgency to ask him a bunch of questions and see what he thought about them. We had a great exchange. After that, Midwin Charles and the great John Donvan. But let's start by giving my friend Bill a call in Washington, D.C.
Hey, what's up?
Hey. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just, doing all the nonsense.
I'm recording. Be on your toes.
Ah, okay. Good to know.
Don't say all those horrible things you usually say.
Right.
About people and things and stuff.
Yeah. I do hate people, and I hate America.
What is America? To hate or love it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right?
Is it?
I used to know. I don't think. I think America is a different thing to everybody.
Right. A nation probably usually is, especially when it's as large and diverse as ours, as opposed to like Norway. Seriously. Well,
there's that distinction, right? The people who think of nation in terms of like blood and soil, right? Germans famously, but a lot of other folks think of themselves as like, I was born here. My blood is here. This is who I am. Whereas Americans, it used to be a civic idea, right? It used to be a national religion. And that is very definitely dead.
America had a national religion?
Sure. I mean, the Bill of Rights and George Washington and the Declaration of Independence, that's a civic religion. That's not a blood and soil nationalism.
Oh, a civic religion, not a traditional pious religion.
No, although I would argue the distinction is not nearly as strong as people think it is.
Right. Yeah. The way that you worship the Constitution, the idea of a country, is similar to the way you worship God in a church or something.
Well, especially in the United States, right? I mean,
I don't know.
If you're a German, right? You're just a German. You're born there. you're an American Indian, you're indigenous, right? We're not indigenous, most of us. And I think that it's actually a really, I think where you see one of the biggest divides in America is between those people who've convinced themselves they are indigenous, right?
Well, who is an example of that?
Oh, the Tea Party people, for sure.
What do you mean the Tea Party people have convinced themselves that they're indigenous, that they were of this land, born of and how does
they feel legitimate to being a full American, regardless of whether they believe in any of the things you're supposed to believe in to be an American.
Oh, okay.
They were born here, and that's it. Game over.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, and you can speak to this being married to an immigrant, a refugee, as a matter of fact, right? Your wife, which is, and it's pretty obvious, and it's certainly not my conclusion, but the idea that if you come from another country and you have any kind of perspective, whether it was better or worse or whatever, you have a perspective, something to compare it with, but either you have to go through a certain education to become a citizen and then take a test. And on that test, immigrants, new people to this country do far better than those who consider themselves as indigenous, including potentially me.
Sure, because they make a decision, right? They're making a decision. I'm going to accept this, and this set of ideas is going to be something that I am going to believe because I'm going to decide to be an American. Whereas, your average knuckle dragger out at a Trump march.
No, make it a liberal. You could make it a liberal.
What's that?
You could make the example a liberal-minded person.
Yeah, except I don't think that I think that there's a difference between liberals and conservatives in the United States. At least I shouldn't say conservatives, because there's a lot of conservatives.
These words mean such different things to different people. Go ahead.
Right, exactly. And so, but say that the Trump supporting type of conservative, those folks are totally not trying to learn or to make any sort of decision. They're the kind of folks who basically say, this is my country, fuck you.
So along those lines, I wanted to ask you a question, because you're interested in and know a lot about philosophy and politics, which is, what is the philosophy of wanting people you vehemently disagree with on ideological issues to suffer, which is not mine. Mine is, I disagree with you ideologically on the most important things, including maybe even race and gender issues, okay? And we really are on opposite. But I don't want your child to get cancer. I don't want your parent to die of COVID. And I don't want you necessarily to lose your job. I don't want you to suffer, even though I might even despise you and all of your ideas. Right. I don't actually wish for you to suffer, versus the former that I described, someone who was.
I think it's a question of
what is that philosophy? What is that moral? Is there a name for that? Is there a philosopher attributed to that? Is that Christianity? Is that?
No, that's not Christianity. Definitely, it's the opposite of Christianity. I think fascism has a lot of that. This sense that it's not I want you to suffer. It's I am afraid, right? I don't.
No. Don't reframe it. I'm talking about people right now. Right. I'm sorry. I should have said this even first. I believe that there are a lot of people in this country, and we've heard anecdotes, but that truly want to see other people suffer because they disagree with them. And if I have to draw it between red states and blue states in this case, it's, I don't mind if the blue states don't get the money they need to survive this virus, because I don't mind if they or their families get sick and die. I actually want that. We have seen people in the hospital even go into the hospital. I heard one story of a Trumper saying, he was happy that someone was sick and dying because he disagreed with them, or that he was happy to die not having health insurance because he disagreed with that idea. So he himself, the point being, there are some people who actually want others to suffer. They want that.
Well, it's social Darwinism, if you want a specific name for it. Most people, of course, are social Darwinists for everyone else, not themselves. And I'm not so sure I believe, except for the very occasional lunatic, I think the vast majority of those people who say, oh, well, the country should just suffer and we'll get through this. They're saying that because they're unlikely to be affected all that badly personally themselves, or at least they don't think they will be. But I don't think there is. I doubt when people are arguing their interests. I deeply doubt when they make statements about their philosophy.
No, say it
Does that
again.
make sense?
When they argue their interests, you doubt that is a statement of their philosophy?
Exactly. I mean, people love to slap onto, and Republicans especially, love to slap onto very self-interested statements with, oh, here is our constitutional philosophical reason for doing this. And by the way, the greatest example, or the greatest way to show what utter bullshit all of that typically is that Trump violates every single tenet of conservative philosophy.
Yeah.
And
agreed. So this is why I think you might be wrong in terms of the proportion of people that you're saying hold these theories, and tell me if you think this is wrong. This all comes from, to me, actually a conversation I was having with my mom on the phone, where I was describing to her what I thought, at least, was Donald Trump's psychology, and always has been, which is if you hit him, if you hurt him, if you criticize him, he needs to punish you, and not just a little. He needs to grind you into the ground. And yes, if you die, good. Yes, if you die, good. If you're suffering, good. If your kids are suffering, good. I truly believe that that's his way of thinking. And I also believe, unfortunately, that is a lot of his supporters' way of thinking. And I just do want to say this to separate myself. I don't want that for him or his family or his supporters' family. I don't want them to suffer, even if they are creating suffering. That's not I don't know what that philosophy is. I'm not saying it makes me unique or special. I think that's a lot of people don't want to see other people suffer because you insulted me. I want to see you suffer.
Well, and again, though, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. I think that people want to see other people suffer. And I'm talking about the worst people in the world, still couch that, and still it derives from fear and insecurity. The Germans didn't all become Nazis because things were great in Germany, right? It was because things were bad. And I think that people are quite willing to convince themselves that your suffering is a good thing if it benefits them. And again, I think it's because people, Tea Party folks, the reason they are, Trump supporters, the reason they are, is because they see the country changing in ways that affect their privilege, and they're frightened to death of it. And that's not an excuse. I just think it's a accurate depiction of what's happening.
But does it really threaten their privilege, or will they do better if the people they despise do better as well? Like, does it? If I own a McDonald's or a few McDonald's, and I have to now start paying $15 an hour, is it not going to bring more people into? Aren't I actually going to do better? Is my privilege in my situation? I'm the owner. Is it threatened? Are there examples where my privilege is in fact threatened, or is that just mostly a thinly veiled, fear without basis?
Let me put it this way: if you voted for Donald Trump, chances are that your ability to analyze the outcome of your decisions in the long run is probably not very good.
I actually think that is a decent generalization, or even an accurate one. I hate generalizations, but I think that is fairly accurate. Certainly he can't see the long run.
Right. I was discussing with somebody who I know who voted for Trump, and my joke with him, which wasn't really a joke because I wanted to strangle him, but my joke was, this guy said to me, I just wanted Trump just to shake things up. And I said, well, congratulations. Everything is fucking shook up. Right. And this guy, hangs his head a little bit and goes, yeah. And I mean, that's the reality, is that people who voted for Trump, a lot of the smarter people, the suburbanites who went to college, who voted for Trump, shouldn't be trusted with raising a dog.
The suburbanites who voted for Trump should not be trusted. Right. Back that up.
Like people who are reasonably well educated and are not isolated, socially, economically, whatever, who voted for Trump, basically had the information to know that Trump was going to be awful, and they voted for him anyway. That's my perspective on it. I'm more sympathetic to the guy who is pounding nails in far suburban Phoenix, who life hasn't been treating him really well, and he doesn't have health insurance.
And he doesn't
He's
have
not
the
sure
best.
why.
I'm going to
He's
go
got
ahead
all-
with that. He doesn't have the best education, like the suburbanite person you're saying, and the education that he does have, a lot of it on these issues comes from his favorite hate radio outlet or his Hannity or his Fox. Like is that the guy you're talking about, where he gets his moral?
Yeah, and his local schools didn't serve him very well either. And to me, you know, that guy, I
right, I do too, but
your average, you know, guy who lives in, you know, whatever, Essex County, New Jersey, who voted for Trump is an asshole and a fool because he should have known better.
Let me ask you one more question, because one more issue, because based on the text that you sent me this morning, I really wanted to mostly talk about this, and I've got 9 minutes left on this chip. I didn't even look at it, but if we go long, I'll let you know if it runs out, because I don't want to. But it says the text you said this morning was, when I asked you if you could talk on the record, you said, "Warning, I've been thinking about the word concatenation." Concatenation,
yeah.
So I looked it up,
yeah,
and it's about sequences of events. And what you wrote was, I said, in terms of what? And you said, in that we are in the beginning of a series of events that are causing a chain reaction we barely comprehend yet. And I think, well, that's true all the time. And it's more true now, because I would argue, specifically before the pandemic, climate change was going to cause that, and slowly was. But this is so much more urgent, and it's happening right now and affecting us, so all of us. And we have no this isn't a weather event. We haven't had a pandemic in our lifetime like this, and so we have no idea how to handle it, how to negotiate with it emotionally, fiscally, economically, as parents and personally. And then, so what does it create? It creates maybe a lot of bad choices or ignorant choices. You take it from there.
Right. Okay, well, speed kills, right? So things are happening all the time, and in the world, and, you know, geopolitically, economically, socially, religiously, you name it. But what's happening now is that the epidemic, well, first starting with Trump getting elected and just smashing every bit of China in the world stability China shop, and ruining every certainty of both, you know, enemies and allies, the bad guys and the good guys, of who they can count on. That already has created a situation that's ripe for things to go significantly wrong in a, you know, Archduke at Sarajevo sort of situation.
Yeah, he really has upset the world order in a way that some people wanted in theory, your Alex Joneses of the world, that didn't understand why NATO was created and why it needed to be preserved, much less the world order in terms of just what role America plays to other countries in the world. And again, take it from there, the world order in terms of.
Yeah, I mean, the world order in terms of stability.
Yeah.
You know, a Marine guy that I know, a senior officer, said to me, it'll take 30 years to fix what Trump has done in 3.
The world, the military,
No, not the military, just to fix all of our alliances, to get the world functioning in a reasonably cooperative way.
I wonder why 30 years. I wonder why the next president can't be like, sorry about that, NATO.
Because trust takes a long time to build. Trust is the easiest thing in the world to destroy. It's the easiest thing in the world to waste. Political capital, same thing.
You went underwater. Your voice went underwater. Yeah, trust takes a long time to build. A reputation takes a long time to build.
Yeah, and there are a ton of complicated issues that were settled that are now no longer settled. Like, does the United States automatically defend NATO? Maybe, maybe not with this president. That's an incredibly destabilizing thing. And concatenation, by the way, the reason I love that word is it reminds me, it's the kind of word that Edgar Allan Poe would use. And it really is. And it kind of gets at the sort of horror of the situation to me.
He was a pretty dour guy.
Edgar Allan Poe is
pretty dark,
a drug addict, and a great
outlook on things.
And, you know, wrote very dark, extremely dark, and paranoid, and everything else. I mean, a guy who certainly didn't mind his laudanum and his brandy. But the point being that it's a situation where are things happening that we don't even know about. For instance, just the obvious things like the energy crisis precipitated by the epidemic, right, has every likelihood of creating much more unrest in a place like Mexico, a Nigeria, a Russia, a Saudi Arabia than we could have ever expected. Or for instance, I'll give you one that you won't read about in the newspaper, where the clothing industry in Cambodia is collapsing.
Why?
That's their economy. Their economy is exporting clothing because we're not buying it because
of the U.S. is mainly is the main.
Yes, in Europe and everyone else, consumption is collapsing around the world, particularly of disposable goods like T-shirts, for instance. So pick Cambodia out of the hat, where they don't even have a big problem with the coronavirus, and the government in Cambodia, authoritarian government, is now busy trying to use it to crack down because they are frightened out of their wits that they're going to get overthrown. And if you know any Cambodian history, things in Cambodia are never like chill.
Yeah, I know a lot about Cambodian history. I'll take it from here.
Political violence always goes.
But don't you think there are, and I haven't paid close attention, it gives me an idea for a segment actually with someone who, like an Ian Bremmer or somebody that's constantly following.
Yeah.
What?
Well, not but.
Well, maybe not Bremmer, but Bremmer. I don't know, Richard Haas. I mean, whoever you want to suggest that's following the ongoings in each country. I wonder what other countries are in similar peril because their economies are mostly based on this or that industry and that is currently dead. That's a really interesting thing to look at. But what about what else about the sequence of events? I mean, what are you thinking about when you think about?
I'm thinking about a series of events that nobody can control, that you easily could see a really incredibly dramatically bad world event, like a war between India and Pakistan, or a real fight in the Ukraine that kicks off because Vladimir Putin is all of a sudden looking at much more straitened circumstances for Russia. Russia has reserves that are going to last about 8 or 9 months. If the oil markets are still in the pit, then Vladimir Putin's going to have to make some very serious choices about what he's going to do with his future.
What is chaos? What does history tell us about chaos unfolding in a nation in terms of who then becomes a leader? Is it a Gandhi or is it a Putin?
Oh, it's usually a Putin. But, really, to be honest with you, there is no rule on that sort of thing. It tends to be regional and to a country's particular history. I mean, the one thing you can count on, though, is lots of people die when there is world disorder. World War I was that, where the old order broke down in World War I. The Napoleonic Wars were that, where millions of people died. What happened in World War II was a continuation of World War I. So, the sort of old school global order that lived up until 1913, the casualties of that weren't just World War I. They were also World War II. They were also the Spanish flu. They were also the Cold War casualties.
I got 1 minute left. Are you on this chip, which is stupid? I'm never time limited, and I could replace it, but we've been talking for 20 minutes. I don't want to take up too much of your time. But do you find optimism in 30 seconds?
Do I find optimism? I don't know yet.
Okay.
To be honest.
Okay.
I don't know yet.
Great answer. Thank you.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Okay, everybody likes when we talk to listeners, and there's a lot of smart listeners. Bill has been a long-time listener of the show and become a good friend, a trusted friend, and people love when I reach out and have him on. So that's BillBinDC. That's his Twitter handle, too. BillBinDC. Follow him. Tell him you heard him here and that you like him. A lot of people loved the last time he joined us to talk about his very honest and heartbreaking story about losing his mom to COVID-19. Okay, so joining me now is a lawyer and legal commentator named Midwin Charles. She hasn't been on the podcast. She joined me a few times on the old show. She's a regular on the SiriusXM Progress channel and POTUS channel, I think, as well, and also on MSNBC. And I thought I'd just do a kind of getting to know you segment conversation with her because I want you, the listener, to understand and know a lot, as much as you can, about the guests that I have on and the kind of credibility and background that they have, so that you can hopefully trust, not necessarily agree, but trust and respect where they are coming from and the knowledge base that they have. So I did a getting to know you with Midwin Charles, and the next time I have her on, hopefully next week, we'll talk more about some of the legal and political issues and cultural issues that she's so good at talking about. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot, and I think you will too. Let's give Midwin Charles a call and follow her on Twitter at Midwin Charles.
Hello.
Midwin.
Hi, how are you?
That's a fun name to say.
I love it too.
How did you get it?
My dad, he just liked the name, thought it was cool.
Well, but I've never heard. I don't know that I've heard it really. Like, where did he get it? Where did he hear?
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea. I do know it's Welsh, though. That's for sure.
Your dad's Welsh?
Nope, he isn't. The name is.
Where are you?
He's straight from Haiti. I'm in my backyard. Is it too loud for the podcast? Should I go inside?
What is the noise?
It's the kids on either side.
You have. Oh, I didn't think.
Yeah.
Do you have children?
No.
I love the way you answered that.
Because everybody, well, not yet, but because everybody's out, it's such a gorgeous day. So there's kids on the right, kids on the left playing outside. So maybe I should go inside. It'd probably be better, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess. I kind of like the sound of their voices, but it might throw off what we're talking about as well. If I hear the joy of children as we're talking about the horror of.
I know, right? If we're talking about the future, potential future.
Yeah. Where do you live now? People are listening without being too specific. Don't give me your home address, but
in Brooklyn.
And you have yards in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I do.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Is it like a house in like a neighborhoody part of Brooklyn?
Yes, it is.
You know, I never knew Brooklyn had that until I was living in New York.
Are you kidding me?
Well, I did. No, I do now, but I didn't for like the first 8 years of my living in New York. I hadn't spent any time in Brooklyn, and I was there because I was a PA on a film shoot, and I was like, "This is Brooklyn?
Oh my God!
Houses with lawns, yeah.
There are beach houses too, like depending on where in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is vast.
Where did you grow up?
It's vast. I grew up in East Flatbush / Brownsville.
That's right.
In Brooklyn, born and raised. I'm a native.
You might have told me that at one point.
Yeah,
my college roommate lived and grew up in Brownsville at least half his life.
Yeah. No, I'm a native.
So yeah, can we do a little bit more getting to know you? Because a lot of people have heard you on SiriusXM and seen you on MSNBC, and I actually don't know you as well as I'd like to. So
sure,
no problem. Couple more profile-y, background-y questions.
Yeah, ask away, my friend.
What was teenage Midwin like? What were you into?
A little bit of a geek, I have to admit, a little bit of a geek. Teenage Midwin, I was in high school. I went to John Dewey High School here in Brooklyn and Bensonhurst. That's another area of Brooklyn where got a lot of backyards with some of the homes. But just a little, I would say a little geeky. Let's just say I was a late bloomer.
Oh, but I know all about it.
I always tell all the young people I mentor, you don't want to peak too early, honey. You don't. You don't want your best years to be the high school years.
That is a really good piece of advice. But you know what? And I agree with it completely. However, it's so hard to hear when you're an adolescent. You can't believe that, can you?
I know, yeah, because you have such a myopic view at that age. I mean, you can't see beyond 18. You know what I mean?
So geeky. How do you define geek?
Just really into, Shakespeare, into reading, and, just really into my books, really, really into my books, but also into dance. Back then I was really dancing. I was in a program in high school and we performed. I took class at Al Vanelli and Martha Graham. Like I was going to do it. I was going to be a professional dancer, but
ballet.
But then I realized this isn't something I want to do 10 hours a day, every single day. You have to do it on days when you don't feel like it.
Yeah,
I didn't like that idea.
So you were a serious dancer, and it requires a tremendous amount of time. But like, who has the what are you gonna do? Dance for a living? Like, did you think about that?
Nah, I'd say the thought crossed my mind, but given that I started late, it really wasn't a real viable option. You know what I mean? But since I didn't love it that much, I mean, I loved it, but like I said, not to do it every single day and on days when I just didn't feel like it. And that's what it took. If I really pushed, I guess I could have, but yeah. Then I was like, this law thing is kind of fabulous. I think I'll do that.
How did you, what was your introduction to the world of the legal world?
Also in high school, the debate team. I really got into, I love that. I really love that. I joined the debate team and I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is absolutely awesome. You know, the coming up with arguments and arguing and all that kind of stuff. I really loved it.
Did you compete?
Yeah. You know, we competed. We did compete. I'm trying to remember. I think we competed against other high schools and stuff like that, if I can remember correctly.
That's fascinating. I wish I would have been into that when I was in high school. But it did seem like something for the kids who are more studious, at least. Yeah. But anyway, so that's fascinating. So then you decided in high school that you wanted to go to become a lawyer, or?
Yeah, I knew then. Wow. Definitely.
And what experience or exposure did you have to lawyers? Any friends, relatives?
Not a damn one.
So just TV and film.
One. Just LA law. That was I know I'm dating myself. # long live Generation X. But Blair Underwood and LA Law did it for me. I was like, okay, this is it. I want to be at that law firm with Leland. I don't know if you remember that show.
I do remember that show. I'm 44. Yeah.
Remember Leland would come in and sit at the head of the table in the boardroom, and they would discuss their cases, you know, and everybody would chime in with the kind of cases that they had. And I was like, that's what I want.
So you were inspired by a TV show. Have you ever told Blair Underwood that?
I mean, I've never had the occasion to meet him, so no. But should I? Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna make the connection. I think I might be able to get to him. I interviewed him a couple times and we hit it off. And I think.
Oh my God!
I'm sure.
My God, I would pass out.
I would. Well, then I really want to film it. But I think he must probably, actors probably get that a lot. You inspired me to become a doctor because of Grey's Anatomy, or a lawyer because of LA Law. But still, I mean, it can't ever get old to hear. And I was thinking. He might. What if he watches you on MSNBC and is cheering for you and has no idea that the reason why you're there is because of him and LA Law?
That would be amazing. That would be cool. But I want to say he's like my earliest memory of, seeing a black lawyer on TV. As a kid, totally.
It's really interesting how weird that is, especially I think for white guys, where we didn't have to look anywhere for people that we could be or that look like us. Right. I mean, black people, people of color, for sure. Even overweight kids growing up, anybody who's like not outside the mainstream. But I actually always think those kind of origin stories are fascinating for white guys and white people to hear as well, because it's like, oh, what did you see? Who are the people who represented, I guess, what you thought you could be, or even if this doesn't sound condescending, like what your limits were, like president.
Right. Well, no, I mean, I looked at other lawyers too, but for me, Blair did it for me because he was hot.
So it was.
So it wasn't. It was like a combo deal. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, of course I do. There's a lot of young comedians who feel that way about me. I totally relate. Yeah, he is hot.
Like, so if I go into this field, maybe I'll meet some Blairs. You know what I mean? So
you really thought you might?
So it was a combination.
Find your dream man, and oh, that's fascinating as well. Where did you go to college?
Right. I went to Syracuse.
That's where I grew up.
Are you serious?
Grew up. We were there. Wait, are we the same age? I told you I'm 44. You don't have to say your age, but I'm in that vicinity. Well, I'm in that vicinity. Well, then, I mean, I grew up there from 0 to 18. Yes, Midwin, Syracuse.
Wow. Yes.
Yep.
Wow.
So you went to
yes, sir.
Undergrad there?
Undergrad. Yep. Oh, wow. Orange woman. Yes, sir.
How was your experience?
It was good. I mean, cold as hell, yeah. Lord Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
If they had told me that, first of all, how about they do all the parent teacher and, come and visit the campus in May, the only month of the year where you can see a flower. And then you get hit with the winter, which starts in October. And it's snow. It's snow from October through April. And it's unbelievable. control the weather. But
I love how
I
colleges
liked it.
do that kind of false advertising to make you think that when you
Yeah.
come here, look, there's a tremendous amount of diversity. Nope.
Right.
We just had the 6 people of
Right.
color show up during your visit, or the weather is beautiful like that, or any number of, oh, you're going to love it
And
here.
then and then once you go to the school, you realize that it's a straight up setup, because like for every parent teacher weekend, they straight up roll out the red carpet. They plant flowers in places like flowers ain't got no business being planted.
Yeah, it's like showing a house.
Yeah, I'm like, where did that flower come from? Springing out from the side, like the crack of the sidewalk. You know what I mean?
Anyway, Syracuse University, and what was your undergraduate degree?
International Relations and African American Studies.
Okay, now.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
What is African American Studies?
It is the study of Black people and Black achievement and Black literature and Black movements and all those things, right? Because most education in America is Eurocentric, right? So you study just about everything about Europe, you know about Shakespeare, you know about, everything is Eurocentric. It's not focused at all on Black people. And so if you go through America's educational system, all you're taught is that Black people were slaves. And then fast forward to Martin Luther King in the 1960s. You're not taught, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not taught about the achievements of Black people. You're not taught about, Black poets, Black literature, Black scientists, Black doctors, Black lawyers. And they existed and they contributed to America and they make America what they are today. And so what African American studies, as part of my major, those were the sort of things that I studied, as well as a focus in Africa, because I had an international relations degree. So I actually went to and studied in Zimbabwe and lived there for 4 months. I did my fall semester at Syracuse in Zimbabwe. So we lived in Harare. And then we also traveled around Zimbabwe to other cities like Bulawayo, Masvingo, Mutare. And then we also traveled to Zambia and Malawi.
Who's we?
And it was the program.
Yeah.
It was an abroad program that Syracuse University had.
But there were students from other colleges, international as well, and
Yep.
What, mostly Black in that program?
No, actually, I would say it was like half and half.
Cool.
It was half and half, and it was just incredible, just an incredible program. But just learning about Africa from an African perspective.
Yeah.
So you're not learning about it from the colonizer's perspective. You're learning about it from the colonized perspective, and you learn about what would Africa be like today, but for colonization? Like, what sort of greatness was stymied or interrupted or knocked off kilter because of colonization, because of the slave trade and all those kinds of things. So that's what African American studies is.
I'm so glad I asked you what it is. It's really fascinating.
Yes.
And I've independently studied on my own for the last, 10 years about any range of issues, but it's just really so fascinating to learn things you didn't know. I remember when that movie, Hidden Figures.
Yes.
About the African-American woman working in the space program. And I remember like feeling cringy that I'd never heard one iota about that. And
right. Me neither. And I majored, you would think it would have, arguably maybe it would have come up. But for someone who actually majored in African American studies, I'd never heard of them either.
So after Syracuse University, African American Studies, what did you say, international business?
International relations.
Then you still knew.
Because I knew I was going to go to law school.
You're still going down the Blair Underwood path.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And where'd you go to law school?
Yeah, I went to American University in D.C.
Oh, man, good schools that you went to. Do you think that the schools that you went to matter so much more than, say, had you gone to different universities or colleges? How much of a difference does SU or American make?
I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of. I think it's a combination of how you work it, right? Like
what you
could. Yeah, it's what you put into it. I am not at all diminishing. Obviously, the higher tiered schools, your Harvards and your Yales, clearly they come with a cachet that's undeniable, right? I mean, if you just look at the number of business leaders and people who are in positions of power, clearly there's a large number of them come from those schools. But I've also met people who have gone to those schools who are complete idiots.
Well, yeah, no, I think what you said is the thing. I find it so kind of almost deeply offensive that it's like the institution that you attended it's like, no, if you actually, had to overcome adversity and you had tact and grit and hustle, like those are the skills that you can't teach those skills. Those are more likely learned. So it's interesting. But I also think when I hear like SU and American University, all due respect, I do hear a kind of like elitism of the student body. It's like, where are these kids all coming from? Well, if you're going to say that if you're going to say that a student body is more kind of, wealthy or affluent or elitist or, not like the most of us, you would say it's generally the case at private universities. And
I see.
Growing up in Syracuse, I also have that chip on my shoulder because I was a townie.
Okay. I remember that term. That was the first time I had ever heard of that term when I got there, because Syracuse is a big college town. And so I remember they would start referring to people who were from there as townies. Yeah. And I was like, what does that mean?
It's derogatory.
Yeah, it is.
Especially
totally
when it's someone in my town from Long Island who grew up with money. And they're like, you're a like, get the fuck out of here. You're just visiting for 4 years. I got to deal with the snow every day. But granted, I was a skier, snowboarder. So, all right. So, I don't know. That's a generalization about just affluence. I'm not insinuating that you were this elitist. Although you have the right to be now, I think.
Not even close.
But people think you are because you go on TV.
Oh, I know. That's the thing. That's the unfortunate thing.
Am I right about that? Do they do that with you or do they not?
They do. They totally do. And it's crazy to me. People. I remember one day I ran into this girl on the train and she just couldn't believe that I was on the train. I'm like, girl, are you kidding me?
Difference between you and me is I would have said, well, I'm doing a story.
Yeah, no.
I'm covering the train. I would never ride. It's hilarious. People give a lot of credence to being on TV.
A lot more.
So what did you want to do? I mean, what kind of law were you inspired to practice? How much did the money matter? How much did the work matter? Did you want to go corporate? Did you want to make a
the money mattered a lot for me from day one. Like I said, I wanted to do what Leland was doing at that firm. I wanted to be at a big firm in Manhattan, top floor, corner office, sitting at the head of the table, running that firm. Like that's what I wanted to do. And I worked my way to it. After law school, I got a federal clerkship. I clerked on the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit with Judge Clay in Detroit. Then I got a fellowship at Harvard Law School with Charles Ogletree. Oh. Then I landed the dream job at a big firm here in New York, Fried, Frank, Harris, Shriver, and Jacobson, LLP. And after about 2 years, I was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not like that TV show.
Oh, well, so what did you think it would be, and what were you surprised by?
Well, one, corporate litigation is just not sexy. Like it's not. Most of these large law firms, they do a lot of corporate litigation, right? That's how they're able to get the dollars and the billables, and they represent corporations. And unless you are at a firm that does a specific type of work, whether it be like employment discrimination or, medical malpractice litigation or what have you, most of the bigger firms, the big money comes from representing corporate clients doing corporate legal work, like shareholder derivative suits, securities litigation. That's what I did for the most part. And I was able to get really good experience, though, also working on other pro bono cases that the firm had at the time. They had a very good pro bono program that you could work on cases that weren't necessarily what we did to earn our bread and butter, like the corporate litigation, but they had a program where you could they partnered with nonprofits that provided free legal service to people in different areas. So I had been able to do a divorce. I had been able to do, represent an artist in a copyright infringement suit, So there were all these organizations that Fried Frank, and they still do, to my understanding, that they partner with, and they give us young attorneys to those organizations for free and say, we're going to offer up some of our lawyers to work on some of the cases that that you have as our pro bono program. And that was really excellent, because that's how I got to have a real well-rounded experience as a lawyer, so that when Court TV came knocking almost 15 years ago, which was my sort of first entree into TV, I was able to tell them, listen, I'm not just a corporate lawyer. Here's what I've done. I've done this, I've done that. Yeah. So it was actually really, really a good experience. So I felt like when I walked out of the doors at that firm after 6 years, I did 6 years there, that I was a really good, well-rounded attorney. So I didn't just do corporate litigation. I had also done divorces. I had also done civil rights litigation. Because I remember one case we represented inmates in New York State Department of Corrections in a civil rights case where these inmates were suing New York State for violating their rights by putting like 2-3 people in one cell.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, it gave me the experience. We went all over New York State to prisons and took depositions, of inmates. I went to Attica and Clinton facility, like all up New York State. Just really, really great experience. That's the one thing I'll say about that firm is they if you take advantage of their pro bono program, you really can get some really good experience outside of the corporate litigation.
How many
other
Black women, or minority men were there in that firm?
When I started, they had a good number. But by the time I left, in my 6th year, there weren't that many left. Law firms don't have a really good, at least the large ones, the prestigious ones, they don't have a good reputation of retaining lawyers of color. They just don't.
Do you have any theories on that? Why?
Oh, I mean, it's not theory. I mean, it's fact. It's that, most of these firms, there are a few things that they do. Well, first of all, you can't necessarily do well at a large firm. And when I say do well, I mean sort of ascend and, work your way towards partner without a really good mentor. You have to have someone looking out for you and making sure that you get staffed on the best cases, making sure that you get the best experience, making sure that you get staffed on cases where the client is high profile, making sure that when you are staffed on the case with a client that's high profile, that you also get to go to all of the meetings with the client. So there are all these things that sort of have to happen.
Boy, that is fascinating.
So that by the time you get to your review the next year, they can say, oh, well, you know what, you haven't done X, Y, and Z, and you haven't been, we don't know that you're advancing on the same level as your peers. But it's like, yeah, but you didn't assign me that stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why when I mentor young lawyers who are going into these big firms, I always tell them, before you even walk in the door, you need to have a list of things that you want to do, and you need to make sure that you're constantly asking to be assigned these things. Because if you don't do these things, in about 2-3 years, they will pull you into a room one day and say, you're not advancing on the same level as other people. And law firms, unlike other corporate structures, like unlike corporate America, is still a very private, it's not set up like a company. It's a little bit different. It's very much
like a country club.
In many ways, yes. In many ways, yes. And when you go into a big firm like that, unfortunately, a lot of those lawyers, a lot of them, they haven't spent a lot of time with people of color. They don't know them that well, and people tend to associate with who they know, who they feel more comfortable with. And that plays into these decisions that are made about who gets chosen to do X, Y, and Z. And after a while, sometimes with some of these firms, it just becomes an inhospitable environment. And it's like, I don't know if I want to be here. Like, is it worth the drama and the stress? And, it's tough. It's a tough environment for people of color. It is, for all, not just Black, but Latino, for all.
So you left there and did what?
Started my own firm. Midwin Charles and Associates LLC, and it's been, and it's been what? It's been 14 years now.
You've had your own firm for 14 years.
I know. I can't believe it.
And what is it?
I can't
what
believe
is
it. And
like?
I've been doing TV ever since.
Yeah, how did you get started in television? Started Court TV?
Yeah. I was still at the firm. I was still at Fried Frank, and I went to an event for Black women attorneys, and there was a producer there from Court TV, and she was there to speak to the Black. It was called Association of Black Women Attorneys, and she was like, "Listen, I'm here looking for Black women to come on to Court TV and comment on some cases." And I had coffee with her 2 weeks later. 2 weeks after that, I was on Court TV. I was like on Nancy Grace's show. Remember Nancy Grace?
Remember? American legend. Yes. I tangled with her before. Did I ever tangle with her? Maybe I didn't. I don't know.
Maybe.
But yes, of course. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and that was kind of, all she wrote. And so I started doing that. And, in order for me to do that, I had to be on my own, right? Like, it was really difficult to work for a large firm and do that. Now,
I would think they would want you to for the PR.
Well, it depends, right? Because they don't necessarily want you commenting on things that may conflict with their clients. So it wasn't always the best thing to do.
When did you get
now I hear go ahead.
I'm sorry. When did you get into kind of the political commentary? I don't remember you during the 2012 election.
You know what? That's because, it's interesting. I don't know. I think that I started doing a lot this year and the year before of Stephanie Rule on MSNBC and Joy Reid on MSNBC. And they just started asking me about Trump, about politics. And I just think that there was an intersection between law and politics when it comes to Trump, because so much of what he and his administration do sort of rub right up against limits of the law. And so, it started bleeding over. And then all of a sudden, I started commenting on politics as well. And then back in the year before Trump was elected, like leading up to the November 2016 election, I was hired by Essence Magazine, along with Donna Brazile, Zerlina Maxwell, to kind of sort of be a contributor to Essence Magazine to talk about the upcoming election. So I wrote a couple pieces for them then, but I think that that's pretty much how it happened.
Well, here's the thing. I won't take up any more of your time, and I know that I want to talk with you about politics and legal issues and all the things that you normally talk about. But I also realized in anticipation when I first reached out to you to do the podcast, I was like, I've talked to you a bunch of times on camera or on, at Sirius, but I didn't really know you. And I thought I could do my research, but I'd rather get to know you as willing as you'd be publicly so that, you could continue to come on here with me and my audience would know everything I just learned as well about you. And I think all the credibility and experience you have on all these things. I think it was fascinating to hear your story. And so let's just hopefully now you can come on, the next time, whenever you want, next week, whatever you want to do. And we'll do all the rest of it, political commentary and everything, which I love you for. I went through your Twitter feed right before this, and it was really helpful in a way and enlightening to see kind of your pattern and what you were sharing. And I definitely reshared a couple of things, some really obviously very consequential, important stuff happening. And you're so good at talking about it. So
yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
So
I'd love to come back on.
All right, we'll talk again as soon as possible about all this other stuff. But it was so great to hear your story and get to know you, Midwin.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
How about that, Midwin Charles? Did you enjoy that? I enjoyed that. I say that word so much, really. It drives me nuts. I got to get a goddamn thesaurus. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation with her. I hope you did as well. Learned a lot, and I look forward to having her back, hopefully next week. Follow her on Twitter, @Midwin Charles. Okay, my final guest of the program is one of my all-time favorites. He's had a very impressive and over 2-decade career at ABC News, where he was a war correspondent, an Emmy Award-winning reporter from all over the world. He also is a best-selling writer for an amazing book that he co-wrote about autism called In a Different Key. It was a final it was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, as a matter of fact. If you haven't read John's book that he co-wrote with Karen Zucker, In a Different Key, you really should get it. It's such an important book. I could not recommend it more, and he's also working on a documentary now to partner with it. So check that out. And, of course, moderator of Intelligence Squared debates, and they're so important. I've learned so much from John, his work, and I'm so happy that we've become good friends and that he joined me to talk about the most recent debates and his thoughts on COVID-19, the pandemic, and a very thoughtful story about losing his mom last year. So I am now going to kick it over to our good friend, John Donvan. On Twitter, by the way, at John Donvan, In a Different Key, Intelligence Squared debate. Let's do it, John. He is sheltering in place somewhere, somebody's house. Hi, John.
How you doing? I'm in my basement in Washington, D.C.
That's a nice-looking basement, buddy. It looks like it's very well finished and furnished. And you got your home studio set up there for Intelligence Squared, too?
Yeah, this used to be what we called the playroom when my kids were little, and now it's the attic. It's serving as the attic as our kids have come back home because of the coronavirus, and they brought all their crap with them and shoved it into this room. So I had to carve out a little space down here to do some professional work, such as we're doing now.
And we are also talking via webcam as well, and I can see that no one in your home knows how to cut your hair, and I got to say, I love it. I really like a longer haircut. It looks great. You look great. I'm serious. I'm not making fun.
I believe you that you're serious, and I just can't stand it myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I found there was a bird nesting just over my right ear yesterday. And
it depends on
wouldn't leave.
It depends on the species, sir. Yeah. Do you have a stylist, a barber? Are you loyal to somebody for years?
I definitely am. Kazim.
Of course, he's like Italian or Greek or something, right?
He's Turkish. He's a lovely guy, awesome. And I think he's struggling right now, and so I was going to do an advance payment because I can do that and get an early booking when we can all come out of this.
How are you doing in this, by the way?
Mostly okay. I'm definitely so not in a position to complain about anything, so I hesitate to do any of that. So I would say that I'm mostly okay. My health is okay. I have food, warmth, my family around me. Nobody's sick in my family or even extended family as far as we know at this point. My wife actually was tested yesterday, came back negative for antibodies. She had been very sick in February. We always thought maybe she was an early case, but it turns out probably not. I say probably because she says the tests are very unreliable. So the only thing that's sort of jarring to me, my mom died last year, February of last year, at the age of 97, and she had been staying in a nursing home up near Boston, and it was a really, really lovely place. She had been through some not-so-nice places, and this last place was where she really became happy, and they were very kind to her. And now it turns out they have about 150 residents there. I saw last night that 49 of them have died of COVID.
No.
Yes. Yeah. So it's just unbelievable. And that place was doing everything right from the day that from the time in early March when we all started getting cautious. They had done everything right. Hands, gloves, no visitors, and yet it was in there already. And about 2.5 weeks ago, I read that one patient had died. 8 days later, I read that 13 had died, and last night I read that 49, which is about a third of them, had died.
Wow, horrific, and that seems to be one of the main stories that we're hearing. Nursing homes and are dealing with this the worst. Now, you mentioned your wife. She, of course, is a physician. She's been talking about this and writing about this, so it's not just coming from you what you're saying here. But so, what are your thoughts about that? Especially because sometimes I feel like these nursing homes, and I haven't read into it, but the reason why it's spreading is because they're not prepared, they're not regulated well enough, they're not ready for it. But what you just said is that they sound like this place was doing everything right. What do you attribute it to? Is it because they're more vulnerable, or is it because of the way that they're living? Is there any way to prevent it in a place like that?
I don't know. This is one of those cases where I have to say I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't know the facts, but I can do some guessing. And my guessing is that the virus was there before they put the measures in place.
Right.
there's a vulnerable population. We know the elderly are vulnerable. By the way, a lot of the staff is sick too. I don't know if anybody's died, but then you've got people touching people, moving from bed to bed to bed to bed. You know, you can change gloves as many times as you want, but you're breathing, you're in such close proximity. So my mother had a roommate, and, you know, I would visit her up there, and she had the inside bed. So you would walk by another person's bed to get to my mother's bed, but you would have to squeeze through spaces, and you would bump up against each other to get past the first bed. And I just think that they were the staff there. Also, I got to say the staff there was great, like really humane. The staff there was like very, very hands-on. They were helping people with basic bodily functions. So there's a lot of biological exchange going on in a place like that. And I don't know how you run it in a different way. So,
I mean, it sounds like, I don't want to ask you this, but I'm going to, because it almost sounds like you lost your mom last year, and very sorry for your loss. But are you saying like it better then than have her?
Oh, absolutely. I can I'll read you a note from my sister, or I can pull it up now. That she was the one who told me and my brother, there are three of us, last night about the 49, and she wrote the headline: more than 1/3 of, I'm not going to name the place, at this location have died from coronavirus. Dear brothers, we were so darn lucky. This would have destroyed us. My heart bleeds for those people. I hope the aide that mom loved is okay. I hope her roommate, whom mom never knew because she was not very compos mentis, her roommate, I hope her roommate, whom mom never knew, made it. It's so damn sad. I guess I still keep checking this because I need to make myself feel better that mom got out of this life easier than it could have been.
It's a really, really interesting, poignant, thoughtful reaction to it. And is it because of the type of suffering, or as well as the fact that
It's the latter. My mom ultimately died of respiratory failure that came on very, very quickly. And so I'm not so we're not talking really about the nature of the suffering, although of course, I think that's relevant. We're talking about the fact that my mother would have been terrified and alone, and we wouldn't have been able to help her out. My brother lives near her. He was with her every day of the last 3 years of her life. He visited every day, did errands for her. Sometimes, you know, would change her sheets and things like. So my brother was very, very involved, and for all of us, but especially for him, I think it would have been just a nightmare not to be able to go in. So that's why I can't complain.
Yeah. Well said, and a really interesting perspective on it. I'm glad that you shared that with me. So I also want to talk about your wife's work. She wrote a really interesting piece, and she's got a lot to say about this. She's a physician, and first of all, the whole idea of this drug,
that's as good as I can't
say hydroxychloroquine. It annoys me. The president actually nails it most of the time, and he can't pronounce much easier words. So that's surprising. Sometimes his brain's on. So she wrote this piece, and basically, it's if I could put it in layman's terms, we want to look at every therapy, every drug, and every treatment as a possibility for any disease, for any ailment. We want to look at all solutions, but we do not want to prescribe them, or much less even lackadaisically suggest them in public if we haven't tested them yet. Basically is what she and many others are saying about this drug, which the president and many, especially in the right-wing media, have been selling. But every physician is saying, what are you talking? That's not how it works. How am I doing in describing this?
Yeah, so my wife is Dr. Ranit Mashuri. I don't have the name of the title of her piece right here in front of me, but the title was, I think, something like "Why Hydroxychloroquine is Not Ready for Prime Time." And
I'll put it in the show links for today's episode.
It's a really interesting read because she took the position that, it's hard to be patient right now. And if there is a drug that's going to cure this, of course we would want it. And of course we would feel better about it. And that's not a crazy desire. And secondly, the idea that this drug potentially could have some pathways towards improving meaningful, plausible pathways towards improving the health of people who have been infected is out there. It's not a crazy, crazy idea that maybe it has a role. But it was all maybe. It was a very, very big maybe. And so when Trump came out and announced it, I remember that day she just said, "Oh my God, we have no idea about that." It wasn't Trump's a bad man and Trump should shut up. It was, we just have no idea, and therefore Trump should not be talking about it. But it was so interesting how politicized it became that if medical people, like my wife and others, were saying, "Hold on there," Trump's supporters saw that as motivated by being about Trump as opposed to being about the medication and its readiness for prime time. So she wrote a piece that to a degree was like sympathetic to the idea that, yeah, of course we would want it to be true, but we really don't know. And not knowing is a big problem for two reasons. One is that the drug is needed by other people, and already hoarding had begun. Even doctors were hoarding it, so that lupus patients, for example, were going to get their prescriptions filled, and it's okay for lupus patients. It's a proven treatment for lupus. They couldn't get their medication anymore. And the second thing is that this drug has enormously dangerous side effects if not administered correctly. So she was saying, you know, even if a doctor wanted to go do what Trump was doing, she said, we don't know the dose, we don't know how often. You know, we don't know how sick you need to be before. You know, she said there's so much not known. And then I found the interesting part is she went to the studies that were being cited by Fox News and others. Oh, doctors in China are showing that it's working, and doctors in France are showing that it's working, according to published studies. Well, she went to the studies, and she writes about this in the piece, what they actually show. And what they show are these very, very slight, between very small groups of patients, like 20 patients or 10 patients with control groups of 10 patients, which is minuscule, that in the group that was getting the drug, they were coughing for 1 day, you know, something like coughing would last for people who recovered 3 days, and people who took the drug, their coughing would last for 2.2 days. And a very, very slight, potentially meaningless, but those were where the studies were. And I said to her, well, isn't that promising? She said, yes, it's promising, but that's all it is. You need to find out why that's happening. You need to do it on much larger numbers of people. You need to have drugs. You need to have studies that are doing the same thing in different places. So if in one place they're measuring coughing, in another place they're measuring how much of the virus is in your system after you take the drug. And there was another study that showed a very slight difference in the load of the coronavirus you would have in your system. So she was saying, you know, maybe it means something, but you've got to check it out. And in the meantime, you're hurting people who need the drug because of hoarding. And secondly, people could get hurt by taking the drug themselves because we have no idea what the dose should be. And so she wrote a piece that says, here's why we need to hold on. It's not about having any sort of antipathy toward Donald Trump. It's not about supporting Donald Trump. It's about the science. And I thought it was one of the best. She writes a lot. I thought it was one of her clearest pieces. And
yeah, I got to get her on the show. You should just go get her and replace you in that chair.
I think that's going to happen, yeah.
But, you know, the thing about what Trump said, and he said this before in terms of, I remember him saying it to like a black audience during the campaign about voting for him, his phrase, what have you got to lose? It's one thing when you're talking about voting for me. But imagine, John, if you were ill and I came up to you with a bottle of pills and said, John, just take these. What have you got to lose? It's a drug. I have all. What have you? That was the weirdest thing that he would suggest. What have you got to lose? That's not how we handle drugs, much less food. I mean, they have to be tested. They have to be regulated. They have to be peer reviewed. There has to be studies. And we just don't have that information yet. What have you got to lose, John?
Well, she writes in the piece, one of the subheadings of the piece is, why not throw the Hail Mary pass? You know, it was, what have you got to lose? Why not throw the Hail Mary pass? And then she explains the downside of the Hail Mary pass. So take a look at it. I think puts it all in perspective in a very calm way.
So lots to talk about with you in terms of your work with Intelligence Squared, which I've been talking to you for years about. An awesome organization. If for some reason, somehow, you're listening to me and you've not heard me talk to John or not heard me talk about this organization, then you're missing out. But the good news is there's a lot to catch up on because IQ Squared is available as a podcast, and you can go to their website as well, iqus.org. And you guys are actually not shutting down. You're ramping up with maybe it seems like more debates than you would normally do, and you're doing this remotely. Tell me exactly what you and Intelligence Squared is doing during this time.
I think it's pretty audacious what we're trying to do. You know, we are in the live event business. You know, like you, stand up, you need an audience. We did debates in front of an audience, musicians, conferences, sports, all of that. We hope to continue to be a live event program where we put on 16, 17, 18 debates a year, mostly in New York City, but around the country in front of hundreds of people. So this hits us right between the eyes. And our CEO, Clay O'Connor, and our founder, Bob Rosencrantz, got together and said, let's not, first of all, we're going to keep going, but let's see if we can make something out of this, a pivot to possibly turn this into a way of growth. So what we're doing, instead of doing a debate a month, right now we're scheduled to do 4 debates over the next month, 1 a week. And we want to keep the visual component of it going at a pretty high level with some polish. And so, you know, right now a lot of folks are turning to podcasts and they're turning to Zoom and they're doing events that were in person, they're doing them on Zoom. And, you know, there's different, you know, from one of those Brady Bunch squares to the other in Zoom. And I use Zoom a lot for a lot of personal things, so it's not a put down to Zoom at all. But the quality is different from one square to the other. Somebody might be sitting in their kitchen, somebody might be sitting in a dark room against a silhouette, somebody might have a good mic, somebody might have a bad mic. And so one thing we said is we want to try to do online debates that you can see that have the polish that we aspired to when we were on stage. And so another member of our team, Amy Kraft, who is our chief of staff basically, spent about 3 weeks researching how we could have all of the debaters look good while at home, feeding into a central, you know, Zoom-like interface and have it look good. And the first thing was we'll have camera crews go to people's houses, and then nobody wants to have strangers coming to their houses right now. Well, how do we get people to do it themselves? And so Amy researched all of these different platforms and all of this different hardware. She consulted lighting experts, she consulted sound experts, and she put together. Mine arrived about 5 days ago. She put together this kit, this home studio kit that arrived at my house in 3 suitcases that includes a large backdrop that put against a metal frame that provides a backdrop that has Intelligence Squared logo on it, and it's very shiny, and it's clean and smooth, and a special kind of webcam, very high quality, a special kind of light, and a stool.
Where'd she find a webcam? They're all out.
She couldn't find webcams until she finally ordered them from China. And so I was testing out all of this equipment this week, and you know, when I bring up the webcam and I push the menu for it, everything's in Chinese. So I don't know. It took me a while to figure it out. But the bottom,
you can't find webcams. You can't find dumbbells. Maybe Amy can find some dumbbells somewhere. Yeah, that's good.
Chinese dumbbells. So tomorrow we're taping our first debate using this system. So I got this kit at my home. We're having 2 debaters, Jillian Jett of the Financial Times and Jason Furman, who's up at the Kennedy School but used to be Obama's chief of the Board of Economic Advisors. They both got these kits at their houses. We're going to be setting them up today, and we test them out. And one of them has a sort of purplish backdrop. I think the other one has a red backdrop. I'm not sure on the colors. But we're all going to have like the same look. We're going to be sitting on the same stool. We're all going to be using the same mic. We're going to be using the same camera. And, you know, the hope is that 2 things, that this goes smoothly, that we can have a real debate, that they can interrupt each other and we see each other. And then we hope that they'll send the stuff back. because it's really expensive.
They will. These are important, influential people. What are they going to be debating? Economic issues, obviously.
We're doing a debate on the global financial system and whether it was prepared for this pandemic, especially compared to 2008. So, in 2008, the financial crisis happens. After that, a lot of reforms were put in place, and the question is: are those reforms going to keep the financial system afloat this time? And
no,
you don't think so, huh? All right.
Well, the reforms that were put in place were put in place to prevent that type of future scenario, I think, with banks being over-leveraged. And this doesn't really have to do with that, is my hot take, given no information or insight.
I think that you've put your finger on the actual thing that will be argued between the two sides. That first of all, I think that the financial system is larger than the banks, and a lot of it wasn't regulated, and that maybe well, as you put it, I will refer to your take on it. I think that's where the argument's going to be. Yeah,
that'll be fascinating. You also just did a debate, a couple weeks or last week, and that's available at iqus.org on the Defense Production Act, which is a fascinating issue, an idea. Probably most Americans had no idea what it was, but there's a rich history to it, its usage, and I had no idea how often it had been implemented in the recent past, but tell me a little bit about that debate and how it went.
So it's available at IQ2 US. I just want to correct that.
What did I do?
IQ2 US. And that was a debate. Again, it was the first time we've done one without an audience, but we didn't have cameras. We just did it by audio. And we had two people who really have studied the history and the use of the Defense Production Act. And this is the one that gives the president the power basically to compel companies to make products that the government needs and to sell to the government before anybody else. So, the classic example during World War II, there was a predecessor version of this act that allowed the president to force General Motors to make tanks instead of Cadillacs. And now the issue has been to get companies to make face masks and ventilators. And the controversy has been that the president has this power, but he's been loath to really invoke it. And the question that we were debating is whether the president's sort of tentativeness on this is appropriate or not. Whether, and the argument was that companies are doing it anyway on their own, and if you get the government involved, it's going to mess it up. The argument on the other side was you can't count on the companies to do this. This is like war, and the need is huge, and you need to have a single customer who can distribute these items to states that need it, instead of having the states as 50 different customers competing with each other. Right. So that was the gist of it. And it was interesting. We didn't have an audience. The first time we've ever done a debate without a live audience. And it changed the energy, not in a bad direction, but definitely changed it. That there wasn't, there's always this little bit of grandstanding in our debates because people are in front of a live audience. And this was much more sort of measured in that way. Yeah. And then the voting takes place only online. So people are, voting for several days afterwards. And then at some point we'll call off the voting and declare a winner. It's interesting to not have an audience. It was interesting to watch that final debate between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders in a CNN studio, and the way that dynamic similarly changed. Yeah. Or I was watching the SNL at home version, and I thought actually they did fantastic work with the skits, but the one that didn't really land in the same way was the Weekend Update. Weekend Update. Yeah. It's very weird to do comedy or humor without people there to laugh. Yeah. If you only have 3 or 4 even off camera, that works. I tried to do it when I was at CNN years ago, and it just lands there. Your joke just lands there, and who's confident enough to deliver a joke without any kind of audience and to know if it's going to work and the timing. It's not great for comedy, but different for debates in terms of grandstanding and the importance of that. So the Defense Production Act, this whole debate I think is fascinating. This whole idea is fascinating and interestingly controversial, but certainly the president did not want to call for it until I think arguably it was too late.
whether it be ventilators or masks, PPE as we now call it, or anything else. It would seem.
Well, Thomas Sporer was arguing that the president's use has been good and judicious and wise. He's a former general. He was a very smart, good debater, and I don't get the feeling that this guy is in any way a big fan of the president. I don't know one way or the other, but that wasn't his take on it. His take was more on his concern that the government wouldn't be good at it. But he also said, all he had to do, this was his argument, all he had to do was talk about invoking it, and that kind of got the companies in line to start doing things. So he has General Sporer has sort of a faith that companies will not want to be compelled, so they'll volunteer in that setting, and that some of them also see the chance to make money, that they see a market, and that the companies that can do it efficiently will take advantage of that opportunity and jump in. So, it's definitely a plausible, coherent argument.
I just don't love the idea of markets or capitalism determining, how a company is going to manufacture something that's going to save a life, because it's easy probably to argue that they're going to make a lot less money off of syringes and masks than they would off of the things that they normally make. But they need to be compelled to do it by the government because of people dying. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know enough about it, but worth absolutely listening to that debate at IQ2US.org. Did I say it right now?
Yeah. And some of the ones we're doing in the next few weeks.
What's coming up?
We're doing one that's not related to the pandemic that we had scheduled and then pushed back because we couldn't bring people to a theater anymore. So I just want to mention that one because we've been wanting to do it for 4 years. And the resolution is the Electoral College has outlived its usefulness.
Yay! I cannot wait for this. Why didn't you do it before?
Because we were waiting for the right time. We missed in 2016. After 2017 and the election results, it became more relevant. And we said, well, let's wait till the next election year. So we were scheduled to do it on April 1st. But April 1st, we didn't have a theater anymore or an audience anymore. So we're pulling that one back together. We're going to do it with the at-home, shipped to your home, sent back to us kits. And we have two. It's going to be two debaters against two.
Wow.
We're going to have arguing that the Electoral College has outlived its usefulness. We're going to have Jamel Bowie, who writes op-eds now for the New York Times, used to be with Slate, and Kate Shaw, who was a former White House lawyer. And against, we're going to have Bradley Smith, who was the former FEC chair, and Tara Ross, who wrote a book called Why We Need the Electoral College. So there are going to be some very smart, very motivated debaters in that one.
That's such an important debate and great debaters. And, of course, I say, of course it's outlived its usefulness. Who's going to why didn't you just book the Grand Wizard for it? It seems so archaic and racist to me, but there are some interesting arguments about, and people should be willing to hear them. Go ahead. What's the other one?
You're so damn open-minded.
Well, you don't want to look like a complete jackass all the time, not hearing all the arguments. I'm pretty good at 90% of the time, but I like to hear. I love these debates. The debates that you've moderated at Intelligence Squared have often changed my mind, and you got to put your bias aside, and you got to put your ego aside as well. And I think it's just so important. And I've had mine beaten to a pulp so many times I can't take it anymore. So anyway, what's the other one?
So we have 3 more booked in May. All are related to the situation we're in. One of them is the coronavirus will reshape the world order in China's favor. The next one is let's eradicate disease through permanent gene editing. Interesting on that one, we were going to do a gene editing ethics debate. It got killed off because no theater, et cetera. That was going to be happening in April. We're doing it now again, but it's made way more relevant by the coronavirus situation. Eradicate disease through permanent gene editing. There's a huge ethical and also practical issues there. But I think we're in a world where the relevance of the question is, just top of the list.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's better timing. And then the last one, we don't have a release date yet, but the pandemic is exposing the weakness of American federalism. And what that comes down to is a lot of big words there, but we're talking about this whole situation we've seen about whether the states or the federal government has proven the system of independent states governing themselves or the federal government having a sort of unifying overreach factor. Have we learned more about that as a result of how we've been dealing with the coronavirus?
We definitely have learned a lot about it, and that's going to be a fascinating one. Just going back, though, real quick to the China one, to tie it all together, one advantage China has over us is they don't have the electoral college.
That's the key difference, right?
They just beat a drum and tell everybody what to make and what to do, and it gets done. Nobody has to argue about it in your command communist economy or government. Okay, so before I let you go, I'm trying to ask all my guests now a question which can go any which way, and it's this: how you doing?
How are you doing?
Like, how are you doing? I'll tell you how I'm doing. You know how I'm doing because you and I talk a lot. But I mean, like the ups and downs. Is there anything you can share? I feel like everybody has some ups and downs, and I feel like if you have more ups, you feel guilty. Good days and happy moments sometimes bring guilt. But is there anything that you've discovered about yourself, about your life, about your family, about the world? How are you doing is the question. That's the motion.
This is going to sound counterintuitive, but in the last, I would say 4 to 5 to 6 years, I've been mostly working at home. I started writing, I wrote the book, and for years I was a correspondent with ABC News, and I was out in the world. But 5 or 6 years ago, I started working at home, doing a lot of gigs where I would venture out to do things like Intelligence Squared, and I would venture out. I do things for The Economist, and I also do things for ABC News from time to time, but I was doing them from home. And I kind of got accustomed to being at home. And now that everybody's talking about the challenge of being at home and are we going to shift to a world afterwards where people will be working at home, and now that I have my 2 adult children are at home and my daughter is home from college, and she's it makes her very sad that she's missing the college experience that she was looking forward to for these months and possibly in the fall. And I hear everybody sort of examining the at-home thing. I'm beginning to have a sense that I had slipped into becoming a recluse, that I was getting too used to being at home as I examine it. And I'm thinking that if and when this is over, I want to change the direction in which I was sliding to being at home a lot, and that I want to get out there. So that's the thought and the insight that I've been having.
No, that's
it doesn't
good
answer your question, how am I doing? But
no, that's good because there's a lot of people. I can certainly relate to that because it started in October when Sirius canceled me. I started working from home, and my reaction is actually the opposite of yours, at least so far. I haven't been doing it as long as you have been, but mine is more I don't want to leave. I have all the connection I want through all this technology to some extent. I got my kids here. You know what I hate? Driving around. Oh, I don't like driving and keeping this schedule where you got to be here, and there. So I love it. I kind of love being home. I got a yard.
Yeah,
I see. Garden.
I've been through that phase. That's where I was, I think, 3 to 4 years ago. But I'm now realizing that I had stopped saying yes to parties, to events, to do you want to go to this concert? No, I just stopped wanting to go out. And I think that's a problem. And I wasn't really aware of it until it became like, well, you can't go out. Now I had an excuse, and I started to realize that maybe I shouldn't have the excuse.
Well, there's no judgments of it. It's what you want to do, right? Whatever makes you happy. Going out makes you happy. If staying home makes you happy. It's a lot of people are figuring that out right now. It's interesting to hear you and I talk about it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I could talk to you for 6 more hours, but John, as always, I appreciate your time.
Can I say a thing to Pete Dominic? I have watched you on this. I'm now thinking of it on a bounce. You went to the Suck, and I see you on a bounce, even though I bet you don't feel that way. And the quality of the conversations you're having, the lineup of guests you're getting, the the body of work that already exists in phase 3 or phase 4, whatever phase this is of you, has really got a theme and a consistency to it and a depth and a usefulness that I kind of think in a way that it's gotten better. It's better than the show was on Sirius. It's very different. And there was a little bit of time when I felt that I felt that when I was listening to you in the early versions of the podcast back in January, that the room felt very empty. It sounded like you were in a lonely place, and now it's so connected. And I want to congratulate you, and I want to thank you for what you're putting out there. You have made me laugh a lot of times and made me think a lot of times. And what really shines through always is the H word, humanity. So that's my big wet kiss to you, because I really do mean it.
Well, I will take that big wet kiss, and I really appreciate it very, very much. It's very kind and thoughtful of you to say here. You've been super supportive of me, but the way that you're being specific there means a tremendous amount to me, because it's that kind of feedback that's really interesting to hear. And I will say I am out of bounds.
Yeah.
I'm back.
Good.
I was drowning for a long time, and I still go underwater, and I'm sure I will, but I don't like drowning. And I clawed my way back up to the surface, and I think my head is bobbing, if I want to continue with this metaphor, and I feel really good. Going daily has been a really interesting exercise, because I was always daily at SiriusXM, and so the idea that people want that and want to hear from all these different people every day is fantastic, and I absolutely love doing it. So I appreciate you saying that, and I'm feeling really good about it, and it means a lot to me to have someone like you supporting me. I have so much respect for you. John Donvan.
I'm ready to push record if you want to start.
I hope we get to talk again soon on the record, and as always, off air as well. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
John Donvan. Thank you so much, John. And thank you to Midwin Charles and BillBinDC and you. Thank you, really, for listening. It means so much to me. And if you listen in speed and a half or more, that's fine with me. That's just totally fine with me. I don't mind. I do that too. And if you want me to talk faster, I can always talk faster. You can speed it up. You can speed up the conversation and learn more and get more in and listen to more podcasts and more conversation. I certainly do appreciate you listening to this one. Tell your friends, give the show a rating, and sign up for a paid subscription on Patreon at Pete Dominic. That's patreon.com/Pete Dominic. It's late. I'm tired. Got to post this podcast. Got to get it up there for you. And I love talking to everybody. Again, I just want to say this on the video chat on Wednesday night. If you aren't a paid subscriber, and if you are, you ought to join us in there. It's a lot of fun. We just hang, we talk, we have fun, we make points, and everybody feels connected and a little less alone, especially right now. So I hope to see you in the next one, and I hope to talk to you and have you listening tomorrow. This is Stand Up. I'm Pete Dominic. I love you.